as you probably know, Norway is a small country, but we are relying heavily on export, both oil, but mostly other goods like fish. And our society really needs also to get access to citizens coming to Norway to work and also attend schools and so on. So for us to be a part of a single digital market is quite important, even though we are a small country. And I would also like to comment on to say that even though we have solutions like Bank ID, there is a clear distinction in the Norwegian model between the identity process, which is done by the government initially on, and the EID, which is issued by banks, but also by other parties in Norway. So maybe some of the concerns you see is not as clear back home.
Yes, absolutely. And Bharat, from your point of view, how does this benefit EU citizens particularly?
Well, if we take the helicopter view, as a bank, our customers are just not only UK citizens. I think they're from all over the world. So when I was watching the video that Livia showed, I was thinking, I'm sure you've got my wife doing the user research. Because when she moved over from Germany a few years ago, I would like to use an example. So when you move over, you've got your ID card, but then for mortgage, for opening a bank account, for mobile phone network, for all sorts of different reasons, she had to be ID&B to death. And funnily enough, when we were doing this project with GDS, I showed her the white papers and some of the results, and she said, when are you going live? So no pressure.
No pressure.
So on a serious note, as I said, our customers are from all over the world, EU citizens as well. So I think just imagine, so it's one job showing the video, but imagine putting yourself in the customer's shoes, what difference will it make when you can actually have that end-to-end account opening journey compared to isolated, fragmented ID&B methods. So I think the consumer benefit from that fallout rate to acceptance rate is immense. And as a bank, we've got a responsibility to do that.
Okay. Thank you.
Do you also know where you can find one of the biggest cities in Norway? Mm-hmm. It's in south of Spain.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Would you like to expand any more?
Yeah, you can imagine we have almost 70,000 senior citizens living in south of Spain, which actually needs to do services online, both in Spain and also back home.
Yes, absolutely. So the Spanish enclave in Norway.
Yeah, it's quite big.
Love to hear that. Alex, before I go into sort of one or two particular questions and your point of view, I'd really love you just in a very, a short way, just to describe Ffrees and why you consider yourself an unbanker-in-chief, please.
Okay. So Ffrees is taking advantage of the opportunities that digital technologies have provided to offer just a current account service to people who are looking for an alternative to mainstream and high street banks. So that's effectively what we do.
Sure.
And on this digital identity stuff, because we're highly digital, we track every single bit of money we spend to get a new customer, all the way through from first inquiry. And we see that we lose 40% of all applications we only have to do basic KYC, we don't have to do AML, because we don't offer credit. So with basic KYC process, 40% of our applications fall out of the window, effectively. So what that means is that for every £1 million I spend on marketing, I'm wasting the best part of £400,000. So, and that is because they're failing KYC because they don't have the requisite electronic details. Now, if there were a digital ID program of some kind, that would make a huge difference to how we onboard customers and optimize our marketing budget.
And with that in mind, I'd love to bring in sort of Bob's opinion. If we did establish a kind of federated model, would the FCA allow us to kind of replace current proofs entirely? I mean, what's the FCA's view on this?
Can I just say where I'm coming from?
Absolutely, please do.
At the FCA, first of all, which we have a twofold interest in this. One is
Sure.
that we have a mandate to encourage financial institutions to make themselves more resistant to financial crime, including fraud. And I think the potential of digital ID in that context is great and obvious. And secondly, we have Project Innovate, which is designed to make the regulatory system more innovation friendly. And again, I think the potential of digital ID in that context as well is clear and large. In terms of whether the system is receptive to digital ID, I think the answer is a clear yes. You might be surprised by that, but even though the standards are global, even though we take our national regime from the EU, my reading of that regime is it's wide open to digital ID. It requires identification to be made and to be verified, but all the law says is that has to be based on an independent and reliable source. And I see no reason at all why the kind of arrangement that we've been hearing about today should not attain the status of an independent and reliable source. I think it will.
That's really interesting to hear. And is there anything more you can elaborate on perhaps the FCA's view of digital identity? Is there
well, we are seriously interested in making in the promotion of competition in financial services for the benefit of retail consumers. That's about value for money, but it's also about the ease of the customer experience when they interface with providers of financial services. So we are very much in favour of developments like this that hold the promise to take some of the friction out of the interface between the customer and the provider.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And if you're looking at projects like this that's specifically about know your customer and kind of anti-money laundering and the digital identity process, what we're really interested in exploring with you is how could and can this and should it impact the UK digital identity models for finance? I wonder if Alex and then Bharat, you could speak to a little bit of that, please.
Okay, so I think again, and I would like to focus on the consumer side because again,
sure,
the benefits across the private sector are huge. So first of all, again, going back to the journey, anything that is online and removes that failure rate, as someone mentioned, there is a very high online failure rate, even just for KYC. And if you throw in the complicated AML requirements from a bank's point of view, the failure rate's even higher. So prior to coming here, I was asking, hey, how many clicks do we get on barclays.co.uk from outside of the UK, where we are touching on the page, open a bank account online. There are 2 million hits every month. Yeah? So that's just to open a bank account. Now, we can't really say how many customers proceeded, how many didn't, because it's very hard. But again, just applying this model to that number, the dropout rate reduces. But more importantly, the customer experience goes through the roof. It's cross-border, it's frictionless. So I think it's a win-win for customers. And then, of course, it reduces the cost for us to actually bring them into a branch and do all the checks, which, again, we heard from the users who don't like it. Yeah, so that's my view.
Sure, thanks very much.
I mean, I sympathise.
Not often with the banks, but I do on that particular. I mean, it takes someone who's put it the other way around. Someone who has a successful application online with us, it can take maybe 30 seconds to get a current account effectively issued. Someone who fails the first stage of KYC has to get a paper-based KYC. It can take a week, and then more likely we're going to lose them. So for me, any type of acceptance by the FCA. By the way, the Innovate people who are trying to drive this sort of stuff through are terrific and a great advance by the FCA, I think. But anything, if we had a central digital scheme that was accepted by the FCA as part of the KYC process, that would make a huge difference to competition And I think it would reduce fraud or security from that perspective. And when I was greatly encouraged to hear about the electronic European-wide identity scheme, for us, there was a great stat put up, I don't know who it was today, 50% of all new bank account applications are from overseas. That was actually news to me, so maybe that's who all the people are failing my applications. It might be, it would make a huge difference. I was approached by a company called Britband the other day about, how can we open current accounts for people in the UK more easily and stuff. It's very, very difficult. And the answer is, you know what? I don't think I can help them. Like, right now, I don't think I can help them. And those are people who want to have business with me. And I'm having to say no, because of very legitimate controls that have to be in place. But there doesn't seem to be an easy way around them without some kind of digital identity program. An electronic one across Europe would be even better.
Okay. So anything else you want to share with us on that regard, Bob?
Yeah, I think there are still challenges.
Yeah.
And as Alex just said, identification of an individual is part of the KYC process, but it's not always the whole of the KYC process. And so I think there is a question about how far in the future we go beyond bare identification, if you like, and into the individual's financial profile. And to what extent can financial profiles be standardized for the rest of customer due diligence? How far will individuals be willing to participate, in constructing packages of that kind? What level of empowerment will they be given in the context of ventures like that, and so on? So the extent to which bare ID cracks the whole challenge will vary according to the circumstances of the case.
I mean, just so everybody understands, if you're applying for a current account
outside of the UK, you have to one of the possible solutions to passing KYC as part of the process is having a UK address. Well, obviously you haven't got that. Then a UK national insurance number. So there are other things you can provide, but they become more and more difficult to get to. And as I understand it, the Verify program and other programs like that across Europe could significantly overcome some of those problems.
I mean, the requirement for a UK address does not come from law or regulation. That comes from the desire of financial institutions for you to have a UK address, and I imagine that's more to do with creditors.
We have to send the debit card to them. It has so much.
Yes, but just to be clear, it's not a legal or regulatory requirement.
Bharat, you want to come in on
that?
that?
Some great points. I think the only point I would like to add is, so we're looking at the one end of spectrum where we're talking about mobilization of digital identity to onboard kind of cross-border frictionless experience. On the other side, I remember just Bank ID, and Tor is here as well. When we spoke to you, I think in the summer, in July, I literally had to stop myself from falling off my chair because the experience these guys showed was something on the other side of spectrum. So you're aiming to be a cashless society in the next few years, before 2020. So the same set of credentials, they were able to log into 3 different online banking portals and also access your healthcare records as well. So I think, personally, I think that's the aspiration that we should have. And you make a very valid point. It needs the collaboration from the banks, a common binding framework, perhaps the government, and the intent and willingness to work together, but to provide the consumer experience. So we would love to have that in the UK, where you can use a combination of single set of credentials, you can access everything. But we're only talking about how we're starting, yeah? So just to put it into perspective.
That's really helpful. And Tor, you wanted to come in there?
Yeah, we looked at the use of EID in this project, but what we found out that there was much more information that actually needed to be shared. And when we discussed it, we saw that we both had this information in Norway, we just use it in another way. So it should be very fruitful if we can go further on and look into how we could use more of this information that we have in Norway to build our profiles in a British context, for instance.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I have one or two questions here, but I'd really like to open it up to the floor. We do have, a time for one, two, or three quick questions. There's a lady there, and there's a microphone just coming to you, just from the front here. Please tell us where you're from, and if the question's directed at any particular panellist.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Julie Dawson from Yoti. A question for Bob. I was just wondering, Bob, if there's any movement over the next period to update your guidance with regards biometrics.
On the spot, Bob.
I'm certainly on the spot because I'm not sure what guidance we do have on biometrics. So that's all I can say. Sorry.
Perhaps you two can connect maybe after this event, and Bob might be able to take that back and answer those particular questions.
I don't think we have any
This is what this day is about, to be able to connect and challenge. Just behind you, there's a gentleman there again. And again, introduce yourself, sir.
Hi, Simon Dean Johns, consultant lawyer. One for Bob. Not to put you on the spot again. Well, yes, to put you on the spot again. You mentioned very helpfully the idea that actually the bank seems to have packed into the onboarding requirement the need for the UK address, and it's not mandatory from a legal or regulatory standpoint. To what extent do you ever feel that for how much this process of rolling out an effective EID program is being held back by packing too much into that initial KYC step, for example?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are several things going on at once. And identification is certainly part of the mix, and the slicker and more reliable that can be, the better. I think that's a win-win for everyone. But I think quite often banks are trying to do several other things simultaneously. They're thinking perhaps about future cross-selling of other financial products and services. Unbelievable, isn't it? They're thinking about credit worthiness. If an overdraft facility or a personal loan is going to be, part of the facility, and they're quite rightly thinking about fraud prevention as well. I think the kind of sometimes painful process that we see at the moment is a result of all these things being fused together. And so to some extent, I think it depends on the simplicity or the complexity of what's on offer.
As I say, if someone who passes, you can do just a KYC check. We don't have to do AML, as I said. A simple KYC check can be done within 30 seconds and an account issued online if you're not collecting all sorts of other data and want to flog all sorts of guff to people. So, the KYC process is actually reasonably sensible, in my opinion. I mean, it seems to cover off basic stuff and it's not over demanding. It's just very difficult for overseas people, as far as I can make out, to get issued an account.
Does anyone have a question that's not for Bob? There's a gentleman here just to David again.
A lot of the 3.3 billion that's talked about identity is in actual fact cost that's associated with completing transactions once you're in the front door, form filling, back office verification of the self-asserted information. What thoughts do you have about the broader picture of attribute exchange and moving verified data around post getting through the front door, which does seem to be the fixation at the moment, as opposed to reducing 95% of the transaction cost, which happens once you're in the front door?
And David, is that directed at anyone?
Barclays, I think, would be very...
So Bharat, and then perhaps also Alex can speak to that too.
So I've got so I know I'm the difference, or we're the difference between you and getting your hot lunch. So I'll be very, very brief and succinct about this. So I think I would like to use some of if Kim's here, a great slide that was shown on the cost per transaction. So if I were to flip that around, so you can see the potential there, how less it costs. So if we move into the big, brave new world of exchangeable attributes and how simple and cheap it can be, then really, the answer to your question is you make an inroad straight away, and then some of the costs can be transferred to providing that experience. And also, if we get people, having high success rate for online applications, we can move that around, taking some of the 3.3 billion cost out. So I think that's why we're on it. So it's a bit, where do we start, right? So I would use that slide or remind everyone for that reference.
And so, Alex, would you like to speak to that? I mean, there is a clear case for cost saving and better customer service opportunities. But can you speak to that?
Yeah, I don't recognise the problem. I mean, we don't have that. We don't face those issues. We don't have legacy. We don't have all the issues that the big retail banking operations have inherited, which is why they need to bring in people like Bharat here to help sort it out. We don't have those problems. We build from the ground up and not from COBOL doing pre-decimal current account transactions through various different layers. So our life is easy and we don't face those costs, and hey, come and join the wonderful world of digital banking.
Do you want to add to that? You're nodding in agreement, Bharat.
Yeah, so I think, again, one point around the consumer. So I think from what we've heard so far this morning, we're all kind of very informed, very clever people around the whole digital identity and then some of the terminology that we're using. But then I was having a coffee chat with someone and I was saying, this is great, what we're planning to do, but if I'm going to walk down and stop 10 people on the street and say, talk me about your digital identity and the concept and exchangeable attributes, I'm not sure what type of answers will I get. So what we're trying to do is great, but before we even get there, I think it's about winning the hearts and minds of our population, citizens out there. So I think our social digital awareness programs, Barclays, I'm a big advocate of digital eagles. So at the same time, how do we educate our citizens on the benefits, how simple it can be, and then in parallel, we do what we're doing. So I think it's a combination of bringing these together, yeah? So that's it, really.
I think you're absolutely right. I'm going to ask if there's one more question from the floor. If not, I have a closing question. There's a gentleman just here, so we'll just finish on this question. Thanks.
Andy Bates from Verizon. Probably an unfair question, but the Midas Alliance, is that in any way being considered or taken on board by the panel?
Would you like to expand on that a little bit more, the Midas Alliance?
So the last time I went there were a bunch of banks and regulators. It's all about increasing the level of online electronic security dealing with banking payments, I think.
No idea, is the honest answer.
Okay, maybe some homework then. Thank you.
Well, in that case, I will close on a question, really. And I'd like just a very short opinion from each of you. So we've seen accelerating the concept of kind of shared digital identity across the finance sector. And really we're looking at, should this be led by banks? Should it be led by governments? I'd just love like a short opinion from you each on that. Bharat, would you like?
Absolutely. So again, if we take a step back, so digital identity, and again, I asked myself the question based on some advice I picked up at a conference in July. So when we think about a digital identity, what is it connected to? It's connected to your official passport ID or a driving license or some sort of official document. And the question I ask myself is, who issues that? So it's a government-regulated body. So it all kind of boils down to who issues your underlying document, which propagates or then starts off this concept of digital identity. So that perhaps is the answer, that we need to have a binding framework led by a centralized kind of government body, and then someone from the private sector to take the lead, and so we are connected into it. So I think it's got to be a collaborative effort. So that's kind of my
Certainly
view.
Collaborative, but with that government ID underpinning it. Tor?
Yeah.
It's very much the same thing in Norway. We're going to a discussion now on who is going to establish the initial identity, and it's clearly a government task and issue. And we are looking at how to modernize our population registers and doing the issuing of documents more secure. You've probably seen the Norwegian passport on TV. It looks beautiful, the new one. But it's just a part of this understanding that this is the government part of the process. And then we can have different kinds of private interests that issue EID. We have bank ID, what you haven't heard of. We also have an online gaming EID in Norway. It's called Bypass. It works very well. It's 2 million people gaming online with it, state gaming. So it's a bit strange, but But there are a lot of different possibilities for private vendors in this.
Thank you very much. Bob?
I think there's certainly a role for government in terms of galvanising, standard setting, but also I think in the long run about being the protector of other values like privacy and making sure that the balance of power and control between the retail individual and the institutions is a fair one.
Okay, and lastly, Alex.
Well, normally my blood would normally run cold when I, as an entrepreneur, when I hear that government is going to be leading the charge on innovation. But in this instance, I have to say, just looking at what the guys have done on Verify, it has been a worthwhile lead, and a lot of progress has been made. But for me, hearing what, for instance, Bank ID are doing, they might disagree that it has to be government-led. So I think the only thing that's slower than government is banks. So I would encourage anyone who's doing a project like this, like the Verify people have with us, to engage with some of the more entrepreneurial digital organisations who can at least they don't have better brains, but they don't have the same straitjacket, so they can think outside of the box a little bit more.